Hey guys, today I want to take a look at the approval rating of the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. And for Joe Biden right now, his approval is actually surprisingly strong. He is now 4 months into his presidency, so 8% into his presidency at this point. 1/12 of his presidency has already gone by. He has definitely accomplished a lot, and I think that he's been a lot more liberal and progressive than many people expected. And he also worked across the aisle, I think, a lot less than what other people expected. He has tried to make compromises, but Republicans have not been they've not been compromising with him. Republicans have been shooting down a lot of things that Joe Biden has proposed, but he has been able to get some pretty meaningful legislation like the stimulus packages for Americans, the extra 1,600 that was passed, but it was strictly across party lines that vote in the Senate. So taking a look at the approval rating of Joe Biden currently, this is the Civics map for approval. So Civics, it is biased against the Democrats. Republicans do always do better here. If you look at the Civics numbers for Donald Trump at the very end of his term, it was only -17. His approval as of that point in time in early January in 2021, it was way lower than -17, just on average even. So this poll has definitely been more favorable towards Donald Trump and the Republicans than it has been towards Joe Biden. If you do look at the approval rating of Joe Biden currently, as you can see, it's just +1%. His net approval has been very, very low. But if you do compare this to the actual polling averages, this is just one online pollster, which is why there's so many responses. But if you do look at the actual numbers here, this is the actual polling average for the approval rating of Joe Biden. His approval currently stands at 53.8% with a disapproval rating of 39.9%. So his disapproval has dropped under 40%. So around 4 in 10 Americans do not approve of Joe Biden, while 53, so a little bit over half of Americans approve of the president, and there's a pretty considerable amount of people who are unsure or do not have an opinion. So looking at the approval of Joe Biden, basically he is approved of in almost every single poll. If you look on Real Clear Politics, he is approved of on every single poll. Really, the only pollsters that polled Biden with a negative approval is Rasmussen Reports. That is really the only polling firm that has polled Joe Biden negatively. Every other polling firm polls him positively. Rasmussen is basically a Republican internal, and so of course Republicans do much better. Now, if you compare the approval rating of Joe Biden to presidents in the past compared to Donald Trump, obviously a lot better than Donald Trump. But the thing about Biden's approval, I think that what we can see here is how stable his approval has been. It's basically been one flat line, sitting at around 54 to 55%. For Donald Trump, it decreased, and at this point during Trump's term, he was at around a 40% disapproval or a 40% approval, which was essentially what Joe Biden's disapproval is right now. So you basically have the same amount of people that approved of Donald Trump that are now disapprove of Joe Biden. And then for Barack Obama, of course, Barack Obama started off very, very popular, but as his presidency progressed, he became less and less popular. For George W. Bush, Biden is pretty comparable. Biden is also pretty comparable to the approval rating of Bill Clinton at this time. So I'll zoom in a little bit here. So Biden and Bush were pretty comparable. Biden and Bill Clinton down here also pretty comparable in terms of their approval. But with how polarized politics is now, I mean, you will never see something like this again with Bush. Even if 9/11 happens again, God forbid, if that happens again, Biden's approval is not going to shoot up to 90% like you saw with Bush's approval after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. So politics is definitely more polarizing, and it's definitely much, much harder for anyone to really have a high approval. I mean, look at Barack Obama. He started off when the political climate was, I guess more bipartisan. He was able to go up to around 65%. That was really the last landslide election that we've seen. And then if you look at his 8-year trend, you see Barack Obama drop down, to 40% at one point. So really, Barack Obama was not too popular for a majority of his term. He's still regarded as one of the better presidents by historians. Mainly, he is ranked, in the top 50, in the second percentile. But for Barack Obama, it's definitely not the best approval. And Joe Biden's approval right now is better than Barack Obama's for most of his 2 terms in office, and it's comparable right now and it's actually higher than Barack Obama's approval right before the 2012 election, where Obama, along with Biden as his VP, were reelected. So Joe Biden's approval right now, on average, it is a pretty strong approval rating. If you look at the civics map here, as you see Biden is approved of in most states that he won. The only states that he won that he's disapproved of in are Arizona, where the approval currently sits at -5, Wisconsin, where it's -4, Michigan -1, and Georgia -10. So that is a pretty surprising rating. But if you compare these numbers to Trump's from 2016, from 2020, 2016 to 2020, but you did remember that civics is, biased against the Democrats, especially Joe Biden. So if you look at the approval of Donald Trump, you see essentially the opposite here. But Trump was even disapproved of in Montana. This was a state that Donald Trump won, basically by 16 points in 2020, and he was disapproved of here. In Kansas, he was disapproved by 3%, Florida, 11%. I mean, Joe Biden's approval right now in Florida is -4. Donald Trump's, at the end of his term, was -11. If you look at a state like Michigan, -14 in Michigan, Wisconsin, -13. It's no wonder why Donald Trump lost. I mean, Pennsylvania, -15% in Pennsylvania, even Texas, -5%. So yeah, definitely Donald Trump's approval was nowhere near good. If you look at some of Joe Biden's worst states on this map, West Virginia, -43. Texas is at -17, which I think is surprisingly high, actually. For Wyoming, -44. So Joe Biden doesn't do well with these Republican states either, but definitely much better than Donald Trump did in some of these Democratic states. If you look at Trump's approval, I mean, in California, -47%, Massachusetts, 44. So definitely not good for both parties. But before we go any further, make sure you join my Discord server if you have not. The link to my server is at the very top of the description below. So make sure you join that if you have not. We're a pretty cool mock government on there. So join my Discord server if you haven't. And now I'm going to fill in basically the states where Joe Biden's approval is higher than Donald Trump's when he left office. And I think this map will be pretty surprising because it really does paint a good picture as to Joe Biden's approval right now. His approval really is pretty high as of this moment in time. And, compared to Obama's, it's comparable to Obama's approval. And he's been able to consistently hold this approval for quite a while now. So with the states that Joe Biden has a higher approval in, he has 349 electoral votes from those states. I mean, many of these states, even states like Florida, Biden's approval is significantly better than Donald Trump's. Trump's approval is slightly higher in Iowa and Ohio, as well as many of these other Republican states. But this does show that Joe Biden is still doing better, even in many of the swing states. He's doing better in Arizona. Basically, he's doing better in every single competitive state in the 2020 presidential election. So I do want to take a look now at the Real Clear Politics data because they do have some more data on their website here for RCP. They have the regular Biden job approval, which currently sits at plus 11.7, and RCP, they are more conservative than 538 tends to be, so that's why they have Biden up at a little bit less. So the average, on average, 538 is a little bit more generous to the Democrats, especially Biden's polling, but for Real Clear Politics, they only look at some polls, while 538 looks at all of them, and they change the results based off of biases that have occurred, with those pollsters in the past. But definitely for RCP right now, Joe Biden's approval is still very good at plus 11.7%, 53% disapprove, 53% approve, sorry about that, and then 41% disapprove. Now, for Biden's approval on the economy, this is what really surprises me. His job approval on the economy is at plus 13%. Now, the reason why that is significant for Joe Biden, his approval on the economy, is because if you do look at his approval here, plus 12.9%, around 53% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's handling of the economy right now, to 40% who disapprove. But if you look at the exit polls for the 2020 election, this is by CNN, who can better handle the economy, it was tied. So Biden 49, Trump 49. Ignore these numbers. Basically, this is out of those 49%, 96% of them were Biden voters, and out of the 49% for Trump, 6% were Biden voters, and then 92% were Trump voters. So really the numbers were 49-49. So in terms of the economy, the country was split even. However, as of right now, Biden has shown that he's been able to do pretty well for the economy. I think that, it's nothing spectacular, but I think that he's been able to do a lot better than what many, many people expected from Joe Biden, because the Republicans are typically stronger with the economy just being conservative in general. But for Joe Biden, it's at plus 12.9, 53-40. I do think that is very, very surprising. His job approval on foreign policy has also been okay, 8.3%, but it's surprising to see that his approval on this is lower than it is on his economy approval rating, but his lowest is definitely immigration. With immigration, this is very understandable. It's mainly a result of the border crisis that we've seen along the U.S.-Mexico border. Trump's approval on this was pretty low as well, but -9, that is a pretty sour point for Joe Biden. A majority of Americans do disapprove of his job on that. However, his numbers are increasing over the last couple of weeks here. The polls released in April, they have all shown Biden -2, -5, so a little bit farther from -9, but definitely still not good. His approval on the coronavirus, that is definitely his highest approval. I think this is definitely keeping his approval up right now. 61% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's approval. You can expect very few Republicans approve of it, but definitely a lot of independents and Democrats definitely approve of Joe Biden's handling of the coronavirus, just how he's been able to be a lot more honest with the American people, as well as rolling out the vaccine and keeping people educated and trying to get more and more people to get vaccinated has definitely helped COVID-19 in America. And since he's taken office, there's been no major spikes. I'll look at the COVID-19 numbers in just a few moments, but looking at Biden's approval on the coronavirus and looking at the exit polls from the 2020 election, 53% said they thought Biden would do better with the election to 43% for Donald Trump. And out of Biden's 53%, almost all of them were Democrats. And out of all of Trump's voters here, all of them were Republicans. So Biden definitely was favored in terms of the coronavirus pandemic and its handling, but definitely not a margin of 27.9%. It was a margin of 10%, not 27%, and only 34%. That's basically the percentage of Republicans in the country. It's around a third Republicans, Democrats, Independents. There's more Democrats than Independents and a little bit more Independents than Republicans. It's around 34, 33, 32 in terms of registration. But, this is definitely very good, I would say, for Joe Biden in terms of his handling of COVID-19. If you basically take out the Republican chunk of people, his approval could go up to, 80, 90%. This is the approval of Joe Biden's handling of COVID. I think it's definitely something that he should be pretty happy about. And then in the direction of the country polls here, I think this is also very good. -6.4%, although that's in the negatives. That negative rating is really very, very good. I'm looking at some of these polls, the approval rating of the country in general. This is basically just where the country is going and how people feel about that. On average, it's -6.4. We've even seen polls where the country has been in the positives. And, for comparison here, this goes from 2008 or 2009 really, with the inauguration of Barack Obama to present. And the highest point on this graph was when, people thought the country was going in the right direction by a margin of zero. That's not even positive, it's just zero. But there's never been a point over the last basically 12 years, or almost, 12 years, Americans have never felt that the country has been going in the right direction, or more people feel that way than people feel the country is going in the wrong direction. However, you do see right now with the election of Joe Biden, it's up at 43.6%, higher than any point during the Trump administration. And these numbers took a pretty deep dive after the 2020 election, and it was not helped by the insurrection at the Capitol. But surprisingly, the numbers here have actually been lower. When Barack Obama was president, at one point, only 17% of Americans felt the country was going in the right direction. 75% thought we were on the wrong track during Obama's term. So Obama may be much more popular than Biden and charismatic, but his presidency was definitely not as successful. His numbers definitely really did go up a lot more towards the end of his presidency. Looking at the approval of Joe Biden, I do think it's something that he should be proud of right now. It's definitely pretty high. And the congressional job approval, not too interesting. It's just bad in general because, you do have a lot of people that people don't like in Congress, and there's really nothing you can do about that. It's, his approval right now, it is pretty high. And looking at COVID-19 cases, just tracking vaccinations around the world, I do think the United States is definitely doing well. We've seen around 1 billion vaccines having been administered. So you basically have around a little bit over a fifth of those in the United States, 222 million. That is the highest, with the exception of, that is the highest basically, at 67 per 100 people. So, there are many vaccines that require 2 doses. I think only the Johnson & Johnson one in the United States requires 1. Pfizer and Moderna, I believe both require 2, or maybe it's just one of them. I'm really not too sure. I think it actually is just one of them. But definitely for these vaccines, the United States has been doing very well. China has administered 216 million. So United States, China, basically on the same level here, but China has a population that is 3-4 times greater than the United States is. So it's 16 per 100 people. And the UK has been doing well as well. And looking at the by country, the Seychelles, it's a very small island nation, 125 per 100 people, but they only have 100,000 people. Israel has actually been doing surprisingly well there. The United Arab Emirates, of course, very wealthy nation, but really the highest major nation is the UK with 45 billion, but the US, right behind the UK, but with 222 million. So I think the US has been doing a very good job. And these are the COVID vaccination numbers here, as you can see. And then if you look at some of these, the data down here by continent, North America is definitely doing by far the best. And a majority of people in North America does live in the United States. And then, of course, it does go down with in terms of the income in these countries. Of course, the wealthier countries do have much higher numbers. Japan, Korea has been, they've been doing surprisingly bad. And, you can see which vaccines people are using. This is on the New York Times, so make sure you check this out. This is pretty cool if you want to get some more information on how COVID-19, vaccinations and stuff are going on. Looking at COVID-19 in the United States, as you can see, this is the graph for COVID-19 in the United States. You saw basically it began, in January, basically. That's when you saw your first cases, February 2020. And then, of course, you saw a big wave in late May or late March to early April. Definitely not too good. Then you had the Black Lives Matter and all of those protests around the country. That was a big thing last year. Talk a lot about that earlier in the summer, especially in 2020 when I was covering the 2020 election. Then you saw a big wave in the summer, a lot of people trying to go out more. That definitely did not help. You saw it go back down in fall when school was beginning for students in the US. And then, of course, in the holiday season, November, December, it was terrible. Never seen anything so bad. Basically, the highest point was at around early January on the 8th, so right after the insurrection, and basically on the 20th of January, that was when Joe Biden took office. It was at a pretty bad point in time, at around 190 cases, around that. Since then, it's gone down, and now we see around 50,000 cases. So it has plateaued a little bit, but no major waves during Biden's administration so far. If you look at how states are doing, really, it's only Michigan that's doing poorly. So Gretchen Whitmer not having the best time there. Most of the country is doing well. California, especially, the biggest state that's doing well right now. Florida, all right numbers, but you still see a lot of cases in the very populated East Coast on the upper Northeast. And so, that's basically how the U.S. is doing currently. So this is just more of the same thing here. If you look at total cases, you'll see California definitely did have a lot, as well as New York, but it has significantly gone down. And for deaths, it's also been decreasing, obviously. But COVID has definitely become a lot less fatal. If you look at the death rate, it was very, very high at the beginning, and it was only a little bit higher. When the case level was much, much higher. So definitely we've learned a lot more about this, and so that's definitely very good for us. And I think COVID, definitely has been handled well, and that's really what's been propping up Biden's approval as of right now. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Make sure you join my Discord server if you have not. The link to which is the very top of the description below. On top of that, subscribe to my channel if you have not. Comment down below how you think Joe Biden's doing in office now that he's 4 months into his presidency. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.